What's going on YouTube? Kronos here and welcome back to the PSO2 video. So today's video I meant to actually record quite some time ago, but to be honest, I just had a lot of fun with streaming recently. So I kind of haven't really been doing anything else other than that. And then after streaming for as many days as I had and working, started to lose my voice a bit. So we took a little bit of a break for a few days, and now we're back. So in case you're wondering, hey, why didn't you stream the other day? It's because I didn't talk really very well. I could hear myself losing my voice, and no one doesn't know, part of my job requires me to speak consistently for almost 8 hours. So if I lose my voice, it's kind of a bad thing. So we're usually fairly careful about that. But either way, today's video we're actually be talking about Grade Augments, or SSAs as they are called, or SGAs, or whatever you want to call them. Everyone has their own name for them, honestly. Naming schemes I've grown tired of the complaints of naming schemes at this point. It's such a meme, it's ridiculous. But either way, Grade Augments. So Grade Augments, if you don't know what these are, essentially they're a specialized kind of augment that requires a specialized slot. Most of the time you can't duplicate the type of slot you're using for them. Your weapons, actually, we'll go to my weapon really quick for an example. Your weapons will be enabled with Grade Augment slots. If you take a look at the Trailblazer, you can see that it has the slot of S1, 2, and 3, meaning I can have one S1, one S2, and one S3, along with any other augment slots I have there. You can see I have this set as an 8 slot, meaning I have the one S1, 2, and 3, and then I have 5 regular augmentations. Then we're going to take a look at the Rivolite. The Rivolite has S4 and S5 as a slot. So S4 and S5 are covered with all the other slots filled as well. Now, granted, you don't have to go all the way through. You technically don't have to use an Grade Augment slot, but let this be a lesson to you. You 100% should. To be honest, if you're not using your Grade Augment slots on your weapon, you're kind of throwing. They're more important than, I would say, your augmentation itself, unless the augmentation itself, or sorry, the Grade Augment slot interacts with the augmentation in one way, shape, or form. For example, the Trailblazer S1 potential melee amp works based off your augments, but in that situation, so in that case, this is directly connected to this. But in that situation itself, even if you don't have your weapons augmented, you still should have something in this slot, maybe not melee amp or something else, that'll still give you damage. Those slots are very powerful. They're percent-based damage, which is always going to be stronger than flat damage. Something to keep in mind. But what we're doing today is we're going to be going over Grade Augments. We're going to talk about them on units. These are augment factors. No, not augment factors. Sorry. Talk about them on weapons and on units. So we're going to start with units because there's less of them on units than there are on weapons. There are a couple of them, but they're not as difficult to figure out. So starting with the units. Now, this is the only types of units that have Grade Augment slots are 13-star units. They're a bit easier to work with. Basically, a 13-star back unit will have an S6 slot, a 13-star arm unit will have an S7 slot, and a 13-star limb unit will have an S8 slot. So, just to take a look at the different ones we have available to us, I'm going to basically go over each of them, what they do, and how useful they are. Now, granted, you might have a different use for them. I would recommend, if there's something I don't go over, feel free to toss in the comments below, but I'm going to use the knowledge that I have of playing the game for as long as I have, to give you guys an idea of why certain things are going to be beneficial versus others. So, dodging, whistle, avoiding, or evading will cause your pet to return back to you. Summoner S6. I'm not sure how useful this actually is. It could be fairly useful, have a bit more control over your pet, but I really can't say for certain. Summoners are kind of a different breed. They kind of run their own thing, so we will look through the rest of these and see if anything else comes up, but as of right now, that's the only one that affects summoners that I see at the moment. Evernight Star. Evernight Star reduces Etwol's boost decay per second by 50%. Basically, it's a damage reduction buff that you get on Etwol boost. When you take damage, you take less damage as you move forward, decaying by, I believe, 1% every second. And this just has that half. To be honest, not that good. Don't really need to worry about this. It's a good placeholder, if anything, if you really need something in this slot. Honestly, I think it's the worst of the other placeholders you could possibly have, but it's not really great. So I'd skip over it personally. Fortified Life Vessel, it's pretty simple, plus 40 HP. If you need 40 HP, sure, but again, not that fantastic. So Fortified Photon, plus 4 PP, again, self-explanatory. Fortified Melee, plus 30 melee power. Now, granted, this isn't terrible. The interesting thing about these Grade Augments are the flat stat bonuses, where they normally wouldn't be that powerful, actually are stronger than they appear. For some reason, in the damage formula, these are calculated as base stat, meaning that they're actually affected by other things as well. Things like your shift to drink, things like your shift to boosts, things like your tree buff, all that stuff, where normally flat damage bonuses that are on your units are not actually calculated this way. So these are a lot stronger than they appear, and they're fairly useful. So if you don't need anything else, flat damage here is not a bad choice. Guardian Shield. So this is actually the other placeholder I was talking about that I was saying is probably more useful for you overall. This just reduces your damage taken by 7% flat. Honestly, I would take this over any of these other options. I mean, photon points, not bad. 4 PP is not terrible, but like unless you're hitting like a specific PP breakpoint, I wouldn't worry about the 4 PP. And Etzel boost, not really that fantastic. So yeah, I'd take this over any of those options there. Granted, I'd take Fortified Melee over those other options, but that's not really something that drops all the time. It comes from Whistle of Chaos, so good luck. Heroic Howl. Heroic Howl just increases the accumulation rate of Heroic Boost by about 40%. Now, this isn't actually that great. Heroic Boost is the thing that builds up on Hero over time as you start a quest. It's kind of like your biggest damage that you get on Hero, some of your biggest damage. And so you're probably thinking, why isn't it good to increase Heroic Boost? Well, all it does is it increases how quickly you get it back. And since episode 5 and 6 Hero changes, especially on Global, we have all of the changes now. You really don't need this potential, or this S6. It's basically the potential from the pneumonia weapons. Since you can dodge through an ability, and whenever you proc a hero dodge, you actually gain back heroic boost. And once it's capped, this S6 is useless. It doesn't actually do anything else. It doesn't move it past it. If it was something like it boosts your actual heroic focus, that'd be kind of crazy good, but it doesn't. So it's a skip. Miraculous Encore reduces threat generation when showtime is active. If the user is attacked while showtime is active, reduce the damage taken and retain 1 more time per showtime. I don't know how often this is used by gunners, because threat level generation is really not an issue overall, at least not for a gunner, especially if you have something like a hunter in your MPA that's consistently using their war cry, which they should, by the way, because even without the effect of gelling on it, it's still a damage increase by taking War Brave. But really it's not that big a deal. If anything, I could see this being used for the 1 more time effect, if anything, but even then I don't think this is that helpful. Hey, who knows? I could be completely off about that. Overflowing Life, Maxim HP by 50% while Overload is active. Okay, so this is a bit of a weird one, right? So the way this actually works out is it increases your life by 50% from it being at 25%. So you get actually up to 30% life. Now, granted, if this was like, it increases your life flat 50%, so you were at 75% instead of being at 25%, that'd be kind of crazy, but that's not how it works, unfortunately. Honestly, I feel like this one's just more of a choice. I haven't seen a ton of fighters taking this. Most of the time they kind of skip over this in favor of capping out their crit from a later option or just flat damage. So up to you really how this works out. I think it actually goes into this really quick here. Yeah, it actually does. Okay, cool. So the effect is only active when Overload is active because the skill adds to your maximum HP before Overload HP takes an effect. It's more of 25% increase to your available max HP while Overload is active. Is it? I.e. you have 1000 HP, use Overload, your max HP will be, so yeah, okay, so yeah, that's not really 25% more. Oh, I think I see what it's saying. It's calculating how it's reduced differently. Either way, it's around the same amount, so it's not really that big of a deal. And then Shield of Carnage. Oh, by the way, if you guys haven't realized, this is going to be a long video, so strap in. Shield of Carnage reduces damage taken by 40% for 3 seconds when your HP is lower than 50%. Honestly, not really used. Shield of Sentinel, gain a 10% chance to reduce damage taken by 70%. Not really used. We're gonna skip over this next one because it's probably the most used one on the list. Soaring Heaven Dance. Actually, no, we'll go over each of these individually. So, Skillful Adept. Skillful Adept increases crit rate by 15%. This is probably one of the best S6s in the game, assuming you don't need a different S6 for your class to work well. And you're probably thinking, well, why would you want to increase your crit rate by 15%? In earlier videos, you mentioned crit rate on an SSA is not very powerful. You're absolutely correct, but only in situations where you cannot get easily attainable unconditional damage. So because in this situation itself, in the S6, your unit slot, you don't have a lot of other options for easily attainable unconditional damage, this is probably one of the best places to have crit rate. Now, a lot of classes do want this to be able to hit that 100% crit sweet spot, or be able to offset some crit minus SSAs we'll talk about later. But in all, this is probably one of the best spots for this to be in, and a lot of things that people are going to go after quite a bit. Some people still have not gotten, others have gotten very lucky. So if you happen to have Skillful Adept, pretty nice. Definitely want that in your unit slot. Unless you're one of these other classes. Soaring Heaven Dance. Talking to you, Bouncer. Bouncer weapon focus fills while airborne. Does not work if weapon is using, or does not work if a weapon with Sacred Bird Guidance, does not work if using a weapon with Sacred Bird Guidance potential. The reason this doesn't work is because it basically is the potential from Sacred Bird Guidance, saying that it doesn't stack essentially, which you wouldn't be using anyway, doesn't make any difference. But basically what this means is while you're in the air, your focus fills automatically, meaning that if you're playing Soaring Blades Bouncer, you can Kestrel, and by the time the Kestrel is finished, you almost have full focus again. By pressing a weapon action in neutral to cancel the very end animation of Kestrel, that way the blades start falling and everything like that, you end up with full focus again and can Kestrel right again afterwards. This is a massive DPS increase for not only Soaring Blades, but also Jet Boots. Jet Boots has a new pair of Jet Boots that increases the range, I believe, of their, the charge time and the range of their Jet Sweep kick, which stacks along with the fact that they would be taking, Phantom as a sub, where Phantom also increases your gear gain or your focus gain, and on top of that also makes it so you cast faster. So all of these things compounded upon each other makes Bouncer ridiculously powerful, and this S6 almost, if not always, mandatory. Absolutely ridiculous. Even if you're not playing Bouncer Phantom, you still want this S6. It's actually insanely powerful. Soaring Wings increases your jump height. Yeah, not used. So I mean, maybe used in very specific situations, but I can't see that used very often. Soul Protection, Hunter Weapon Focus, and Katana Focus. What's it? Hunter Weapon Focus and Katana Focus fills while guarding. Does not work if using the Gale Blade potential. Okay, so this is just one of those like autofill for your focus. I don't think this is very useful consistently, because you're not going to just hold guard to fill your focus, especially with some of the changes that Braver saw, where they start with full focus anyway. And Hunter can get focus fairly quickly, so it's not really that big of a deal. So I wouldn't see this being very useful at all. Tenacious Heal Scourge. Grand Sweep Armor for 6 seconds after being inflicted by the status ailment. I guess technically it'd be kind of interesting with Fighter, but I don't see this being used very often. We're gonna kind of start to breeze through these. We've already been 12 minutes in and we've only gotten through one set of S6s. Fun. S7s. So empathetic communication or communion, not really what used. Actually, no. Automatically answers any pet's sympathy request while alter ego is active. Does not work if weapon sinister snare potential is active. I don't know how useful that S7 is. Again, this is a summoner thing. Maybe useful for summoners. I would highly recommend. Let's just say the potential comes from the weapon Ragor Staff, which has a stronger effect of this. Actually, might not be used because I think summoners are still using Ragor Staff during alter ego and then swapping off of it. Or maybe this is like the option to not have to touch Ragor Staff anymore. Not sure. We'll have to see how that works out. Fortified Attack and Fortified Attack 2, along with melee, range, and technique. We talked about these. They're very strong. So this is just the same effect from beforehand. Supreme Perfection gains a 10% chance to stun enemies with the perfect attacks. Probably wouldn't use against all these other options that are available. Just flat damage is going to give you more. A medicinal potential boosts the effect of recovery items. Again, not going to use. Instill Grace, recover 4 PP per second while standing still for more than 1 second. This could actually be of use for classes like Ranger, where you're just standing still and attacking. Possibly Force Etoile, where you're standing still and casting. So it just depends. But again, flat damage is kind of crazy good. At least in this slot, since the multipliers just work out in your favor. S8's a little bit easier as well. Again, S8 is just going to have some HP, PP, and a little bit of damage here. We already talked about how these work out. And then Mighty Medication makes you temporarily invincible while drinking a mate item. There's a ring that already does this. I wouldn't waste an S8 on it. However, this last spot, the one spot you want, the one thing that everyone's farming for because it's absolutely ridiculous, Sky Dance Support. Sky Dance Support drops from DU Funeral over level 91. It also drops in a lot of other spots. But it has a random chance on some on leg units. But basically, it's activate shift and deban after staying in the air for 2 seconds, and then every 10 seconds afterwards. So basically, how this works out is you jump in the air, you attack like once or twice. If you're in the air for 2 seconds, bam, shift and D-bands on you for like a tick. As long as you're in the air, shift and D-band keep stacking on you for multiple ticks. Now, I believe the shift to D-band tick is only 10 seconds. So if you're in the air for 2 seconds, then stay in the air. You'll consistently keep like a small rotation of shift and D-band going on you, but when you drop to the ground, you only have 10 seconds to be back in the air again. But then after you're in the air again for 2 more seconds, you have shift and D-band again. So most people tend to jump up, swing twice, and then in the air for 2 seconds, let it tick, fall to the ground, jump up and do it again. It'll happen again after 2 seconds. So they stack it up very early on in a quest, and then like, of course, try to just maintain it throughout the entire thing. But Skynnet support is really, really useful. It's arguably one of the strongest S8s in the entire game. Even if you can cast shift and D-band for yourself in some situations, this is crazy powerful. The only time this isn't really used is in situations where you're in like in an MPA and a Techer is going to be able to keep shift and D-band up on you 100% of the time without having to try. So very, very powerful, very useful stuff. Let's move on to the weapons. So this one's a little bit longer. And by a little bit, I mean like a lot. So S1 through S3. This one's going to be fairly self-explanatory when it comes down to it in most cases. So we're going to kind of jump through these and what they do and how they're useful as much as possible. Again, I will try to make this as brief as I can, but there are a ton of these. Aggressive Will, 2% attack power, pretty simple. Melee Amp, this is for every 60, and that works the same way, by the way, for melee, range, and technique. We're going to explain one of these. So every 60 main stat you have affixed to your weapon, you get 1% power. You get an additional 2% power if this goes at least 200. So basically the way this works out, every 60 gives you 1%. Get 2% more at 200. Basically getting 5% on this as long as you affix 200, which is why Trailblazer weapons, you want to go for the affix of at least 200. Some crazy people tend to go for 240, which is insane, especially if you have to do this in only 5 slots, but how this S1 works. Again, you do not want to skip out on making sure you fill up all of your SSA slots. If you cannot make use of one specific SSA, then move on to a different one instead. Always fill them out. Make sure you're using them. They're very powerful. Augmented Life Boon increases HP recovery from self-healing by 40%. Wouldn't worry too much about that. A lot of HP healing has caps on it anyway, so just move on from there. Oh, hold on a second. Okay, hopefully that was only a second for you guys. Through the power of editing, I say editing and it was just the pause button. God, that's such a nice feature to have now. But we're back anyway. Let's jump back into this. So we spoke about Augmented Life Boon previously. I think that's the last thing we touched on, but it's just increased healing. And most self-healing has caps on it anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Any self-healing that doesn't have a cap on it heals by more than enough as it is, so it's not anything that's going to be necessary. Augmented Will. So Augmented Will is another one of those augments that is based on the number of augments you have. The only difference is it's not based on the amount of main stat you have. So it's good to have in cases that you can't use something like melee amp, ranged, or tech amp. We still get a good chunk of damage out of it overall. So a lot of the times people will recommend picking up Augmented Will if you can fill up all 8 slots, but you can't get to 200 melee power. Not a bad choice. A bit of a cheaper option. Still get a lot of damage out of it. Comrade's Blessing. So I've seen some people use this, but I haven't seen anyone use this that actually is like hardcore on pushing damage. Basically, it has different effects as you have more people in your party, just as in your party itself, not in the actual MPA overall. But the bonuses only apply to you, so you know. Again, it's just another way of getting 3% attack power, but you could get it other ways fairly easily, so I wouldn't really bother. Honestly, I'd personally take the 2% attack power unconditional versus having to be in a party, so that's just me personally. Granted, you also get 10% crit rate and PP cost consumption, but not worth it. Crippling Erode. Attacking an enemy grants 25% chance to inflict the target with status Gelin. You're gonna get this taken care of mostly anyway, other than like very, very niche setups. I think like there might be some hero setups that might do this where they have this on one of their weapons, switch to it, and like their actual like process of all their weapon swapping just to get Gelin up. But mostly it's only effective for like solo situations, so probably wouldn't look at it in any other situation other than that specifically. Dance with Death. I've heard of people using this, but again, this is one of those where I don't think it's really that great. Essentially, it's increased attack power every time you take damage, and on the 10th hit you explode and your HP goes down to 1. It does damage to everything nearby you and it resets the effect, so it goes all the way back. But if you hit 9 times and then never take any more damage, That is a 10% increased damage, so not bad. If you can manage to set it up, but I probably wouldn't use Dance with Death personally. Leaf Gleam. So these are all different effects of Gleams. I'm gonna let you guys take a look at each of these individually, but the only one that really gets any use that I've seen is Petal Gleam. Petal Gleam is increased power by 3% for 30 seconds after inflicting 450,000 damage, which is not that difficult to do nowadays. Basically, it's just going to be 3% power, and you keep getting this up every 30 seconds. Not too bad. But there's a bunch of other different options you can look at. There's some for PP cost reduction, damage taken, increased damage dealt to bosses, so on and so forth. But Petal Gleam is pretty much the common one I see used, if any of these at all. And most of the time, this is used in situations where you do not have access to crit damage. Crit damage is really commonly going to be used in the S1 through S3 slot. If not, you go raw damage, just because these are mostly the damage slots in most cases. Loosened Domain recovers PP when a nearby enemy is defeated. There's only one situation I've seen this be useful for. If you guys have ever seen, actually, I'll tab over to it really quick. I actually have a weapon I use specifically for leveling through keys, and only through keys, not in MPAs. I've seen people use these types of weapons in MPAs, and it blows my mind. But when I'm leveling through keys, and my alts are a different level, different class on my main character, I use this weapon to do keys. And the reason I use Loosened Domain 2 is it gives you 4 PP when an enemy nearby dies. As you know, with this weapon, you're just shooting and killing a bunch of enemies all at the same time with the PA. If you do it right, you can actually end up gaining PP on the use of a PA instead of losing it, which is kind of cool. That's really the only reason I've had to use this. I'm sure there might be some other reasons to use it, but that's not anything that I've come across personally. Luminous Adaptation is natural PP regeneration by 80% when weapon is sheathed. Natural PP regeneration is reduced by 100% when the weapon is unsheathed. This is used mostly for, actually the only reason this is really used is for what's called a PP battery. Most of the classes will have another way of regenerating PP, but not every class will have access to this. So I have this on a gun slash. That way, if I just switch the weapon while we're running from enemy to enemy, or if I'm in the middle of an intermission or downtime, I can generate a ton of PP back. You just have to have your weapon holstered and you're good to go there. Let's see. Luminous Grace this is natural PP recovery by 20%. This is just the PP recovery you have normally. This isn't affected by your weapon being sheathed or unsheathed. This is useful for classes like Hero. If you're making a PP battery or you have reload on your TMGs, having this on a set of TMGs helps that reload or helps that regen even higher. So pretty nice when you have that going. Actually, does it halt while you have your weapon out? I'm trying to think if TMGs halts your PP recovery while your weapon is out. I think this is the one for it. I might be mistaken about that. You might want to double check me on that one. Lustrous Part Breaker increases active PP recovery by 40% when attacking breakable parts. Again, this is PP recovery. This isn't PP battery setup or anything along those lines, so having it as S1 not going to really be used very often. Lustrous Strike increases active PP recovery by 17%. Before the Genin weapons came a thing, this was actually pretty good on a gun slash for a a force, but it's really not used very much anymore. You're not really using this to generate PP back for almost any class, actually. So Lustrous Strike can be mostly skipped. Part Breaker's Will increases damage dealt against breakable parts by 4%. This has really only been used in situations or very, very niche setups. I've seen some people use this, like some bouncers or some other classes use this when they're fighting PD. They have a weapon with just all of the Part Breaker's Wills on them because it's 4% damage increase to breakable parts. And there's a ton of breakable parts on those targets itself, so they'll just swap to the weapon on the breakable part, swap off of it when it's no longer breakable, increase damage, so on and so forth. Perfect Will Chain increases damage by 2% when performing successive perfect attacks and normal attacks. Maxes at 3%. Again, it's another damage. This is conditional based. I'd skip it personally, not really that great. Photonic Will increases attack power by 3% while PP is at or above 40%. More condition, only 3%, skip. Photon Balance increases PP consumption by 8% in exchange for 4% more damage on PAs and techniques. This could be useful in one setup only specific that I've ever seen personally, and that's for like a hero TMG. Might be useful there, but I think the cost might be a little too high as far as outweighing the actual amount that you gain undamaged. So I would say maybe test it, see how you feel about it. But it's not terrible, but again, it's more conditional based damage, not unconditional, so be careful with that. Photon Descent reduces PP consumption by 7%, not damage. Photon Descent 2, more not damage. Precision Will increases critical hit damage by 3%. Critical hits are fairly common nowadays. You're going to be stacking crits, so 3% damage unconditional for just hitting crits that you're always going to hit anyway. Fairly nice. I guess it's not unconditional because it requires you to crit, but still very powerful. Increases, Spectre's will increases attack power based on photon gauge. So I would skip, personally, but it might have some use in excuse me, in endless. So to each is their own, but for most people, gonna be a skip. Skillful Adept increases crit rate by 15%. This is again one of the situations I was talking about beforehand with the unit, where this is not as useful in this slot specifically because you can get damage. So again, a skip. Timeful Vitality restores 40% of your maximum HP every 40 seconds. Skip. Timeflow Will increases attack power. Increases attack power every second to a maximum of 4% after 30 seconds. Still skip. Probably not terrible, but still skip, to be honest. Really not that useful. There may be like one niche setup that this is helpful in, but like mostly going to be a skip. Actually, the one I'm thinking of is actually Signal Burn, but I don't think that has an S1 slot on it, so I'd probably still skip. But if it worked on that, that'd be cool. And for anyone who's curious what Signal Burn is, it's just a gun slash that after 30 seconds, you could attack once and it explodes for a bunch of damage, and then it goes to 1 damage for the rest of the quest. So it's kind of like a little bit of a cheesy weapon that you can use. And if it works, and this has an S1 slot, then you can always stack this along with it. So there you go. But probably doesn't. So teach their own. You can only dream. You can always dream, right? 2-edge strike is 4% damage, but you take 8% more damage. A lot of things are hitting really hard now, so this isn't exactly something you want to go for all the time, but it may not be a bad choice for 4% increased damage. It's a lot of damage, and it's mostly unconditional. I guess technically it's not unconditional because the condition is you take more damage, but the condition doesn't matter that much for some classes, so just be careful. 4% more damage can be pretty substantial. Will of Dying increase attack power by 4%, but reduces HP by 5% of max. Reduces HP by 5% of your max HP by every 20 seconds. Just gonna be, I'm gonna say a skip. Honestly, not really that useful. Like you could argue that you could pretty much out heal this with just a healing SSA, but I don't think it's really worth it. Elementalist will increases damage by 4% when you're equipped with a guard type ring, or a weapon element matches the enemy's elemental weakness. This is actually pretty useful for 4% damage. This was one of these S1s that actually I would recommend on maybe like a Techer Wand, since you're always changing elements, or on Jet Boots, since you can change elements on those pretty standard. But I wouldn't give up your right ring slot for this to make this get this extra 4% damage. So that's just me personally. Now a lot of these are going to be the same. I'm going to try to pick out the ones that have been different that kind of pop in here. But we talked about Aggressive Will. Dynamo Dance is a bit different. Increases damage by 3% when consecutively chaining attacks or different PAs together with perfect attacks. Not bad. Still wouldn't really bother with going. Goliath Slayers Will increases damage dealt to bosses by 3%. This is a good filler S2 in situations where you don't have access to just crit damage. And really, damage on bosses is mostly what's important. Not really going to be on mobs that much. Mobbing does become a bit more important sometimes in certain quests, but this is where you really want your highest amount of damage anyways on bosses. So Goliath Slayer's Will is not bad. Lucid Adversity. So Lucid Adversity recovers 15% of your PP when you take damage. Now this is in combination with another weapon, the Get On series, that you will that you will use. Essentially what you do is with the Get On series, whenever you use a PA, instead of draining your PP, you drain less of your PP, but you actually drain your HP pool. And what happens is this actually affects Lucid Adversity, since whenever you take damage, you recover PP back. So what you're actually able to do is, there's an S3 for this as well, we'll go into, but you're able to stack this S2 and this S3 together to essentially create an infinite PP battery. You can't kill yourself with Genin. Genin will always only bring you down to 1 HP, but you can of course you'll start using PP when you start doing that, but you can actually gain back PP very quickly. In situations where you can cast attack, you can put Narbarda type 0 maybe twice, I want to say 3 times, and you're at full PP immediately, and all you have to do is tap it. It's pretty crazy. So Lucid Adversity, very helpful, very good. Lucid Domain recovers 3 PP when nearby enemy is defeated. Again, we talked about how this works, so we're not going to worry about that too much. Luminous Adaptation is the S2 version of the S1 that we talked about earlier. It's 100%, so you stack this with the S1, get more natural PP recovery. Very nice. Luminous Grace we talked about. Lustrous Breaker, it's just PP recovered by 35% when attacking breakable parts. Not going to worry about it because it's not damage. Lustrous Strike we talked about. Lustrous Strike 2 is just a stronger version we talked about. Medical Grace, we talked about something similar to this, but this is just a damage version. I'm sorry, it's just a healing version of it. Essentially, you gain PP back when you restore certain made items, but again, this is an S2 and it's on a weapon, so damage slot. Luminous Moonleaf. So these S2s start to come in situations where you come with certain S2s where they activate depending upon another S1 being active. So we talked about the Petal Gleam and all the other stuff from beforehand. These activate based on those being activated. So you can do some interesting combinations. So Luminous Moonleaf. While Moon Gleam, Leaf Gleam, or Shadow Gleam are active, natural PP recovery is increased by 25%. So cool there. Lustrous Moonleaf, while Moon Gleam, Leaf Gleam, or Shadow Gleam are active PP recovery is increased by 25%. So this is just passive versus active. And then you can kind of read through all of these. Honestly, this is more of a, I want to try something out, so I'm going to put these combinations together, but I don't think these are the ones you would normally use. Let me see if this is a attack power increase every second, maxes down to 5%. This doesn't include Petal Gleam, so no, this isn't the combination that you would actually use these on. You can check these out individually. I'm going to leave a link to this, honestly, in the video description, but not really anything you need to worry about. At least not these ones specifically. There'll be ones later that you'll want to get in a combination. These are all very weird and they're damage resistant, so we skip them. To be perfectly honest, sorry. Partbreaker's Will, we already talked about. Perfect Descent. Reduces PP consumption by 12% when consecutively attacking or chaining. Yeah, we talked about this as well. Petal Sea Adept. Oh yeah, this is one of the ones you might want to look into. So while Petal Gleam, Sea Gleam, or Snow Gleam are active, critical hit rates increase by 20%. So this is a critical hit rate setup. Not critical hit damage, so it might not be as great, but it is going with Petal Gleam, and that's actually the better S1 you want to keep an eye on. So combinations with Petal Gleam are actually going to be fairly useful in situations where you're not going for crit setups. Petal Descent is PP consumption. Petal Descent 2, more PP consumption reduction. Vitality is healing, and Rainbow Will. While either of these are active, and power is 5%. Oh, okay, so this actually might be the one you go for, is Rainbow Will. While Petal Gleam, Sea Gleam, Snow Gleam, Moon Gleam, Leaf Gleam, or Shadow Gleam are active, attack power is increased by 5%, has a 35-second cooldown upon activation. So not bad there, pretty useful, though we can't get it. It's in Divide Quest, and Divide Quests aren't out yet. So it'll be something to keep a hold on. I probably would go to this personally. It's 5% more damage, so pretty nice. Rainbow Vitality, again, this is healing, probably going to skip. Runner's High, natural PP recover while running, probably skip. And let's see, Sky Earth Loose. I haven't even heard of this one. This is a weird name for it. Reduce 78% airborne. I mean, again, this is not damage. It's just more active PP management, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. Will of the Petal Sea. This one definitely would be one I would probably go for. Now that I'm looking at it, I think this is the one that I would go for overall, because this is just attack power by 3% when you have Petal Gleam active, which is just flat damage. Very, very nice. No downtime, so you're good to go. It just makes Petal Gleam even stronger while it's up. Photon Descent, we talked about. Precision Will is 3% damage to critical hit. Very nice. Precision Will 2 is just increasing that to 4%. Again, very nice. Reduces PP consumption by 5% for 30 seconds upon landing a PA or technique. Again, this is one of the situations where you can kind of skip over a lot of these things. I'm kind of feeling like maybe we'll just go over what's actually useful in these slots. So yeah, I think that's probably going to be for the better for us. So Skillful Adept, crit rate, we skip. Skillful Adept 2, still crit rate, we still skip unless you absolutely need crit in these slots. I don't think there's any class that really needs crit in these slots specifically. Let's see, Spectre, nope, skip. That would be a skip, that would be a skip, that would be a skip, 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 skip. Well, no, hang on, TBS Fatality, nope, skip. And then Two-Edged Strike. Again, this is more like Double-Edged Strike, but it's a weaker version because it's an S2 slot. This is 3% power, but takes 6% more damage while it's drawn. Unless you're going for some very, very weird setups where you want to take more damage for some strange reason, I'd probably skip over this as well. But it's 3% power, so it's not too bad. Aggressive Will, of course, this is one of those flat damage, not a bad choice. Axiom Will, this is similar to Perfect Keeper, where as long as you're above 80% HP or above a certain HP threshold, you get increased damage. Not a terrible choice, but again, there are other options that are easier. Dynamo Dance we talked about, Guardian Shield we talked about in a different slot. Lucent Adversity is the one that you stack with the other Lucent Adversity itself. Lucent Domain we talked about. Luminous Grace we talked about. Luminous Strike, or sorry, Lustrous Strike we talked about. And then back to the Moon Leaves again. I want to see if we can find the other one that you would go with Petal Gleam. Nope, skip, mostly skip. Precision Will 3, definitely, I'm sorry, Precision Will, definitely useful. There will be a Precision Will 2 that ups us to 5% if I remember correctly. We currently don't have it yet, so this is the best we have in this slot. Not a bad choice. It will get better. Skip. Skillful Adept, we talked about. Again, this is critical hit rate in a damage slot we want to skip over. Skip. Strike Flow. This is a lot of crit rate, don't get me wrong, but again, I don't think this is absolutely necessary. Skip. Skip as well. You know what? So it doesn't look like we have the third S or the S3 for Petal Gleam. There's Luminous Rainbow, which is natural PP recovered by 40%, and there's active PP recovered by 45%. I don't think we have the other S3. We don't. Doesn't look like it. Actually, Petal C Song. Every second maxes out by 7% for 15 seconds. This might not be a bad choice for right now. Or this might be the choice to make, actually. I'm not 100% sure. So it's while Petal Gleam is active, and Petal Gleam is up for 30 seconds. Meaning you'd only have this up for 15 seconds. I mean, it would build over time, but you'd only have this up for 15 seconds itself. So it's not terrible, but there may be a better choice later on, so just keep an eye out for it. This is probably the one you want to go with the Petal Gleam setup for right now, though. But again, I think this comes from Divide Quest. Yeah, Divide, which we don't have yet, so we'll have to wait on that. I'm pretty sure we're getting Divide on the next major update, so. S4s are a bit more complicated, which is why I wanted to get to these as soon as possible, because we really do want to go through each of these. There's a lot of choices here. So S4 is a bit more of a utility slot. Amplified Adept, a critical hit rate increased by 50% when attacking an enemy affected by any status effect, including Gelin and Blight rounds. Skip. It's crit rate, not worried about it. Flash Guard, loosen, recover 10 PP when performing a just guard. Performing a perfect guard. This works with Hunter. Apparently also works with Etoile. Still wouldn't take it as an S4 personally. Not a bad choice, but you have plenty of other ways of regenerating PP. And right now we're using, as an Etoile, you're using your S4 as a placeholder slot for something later on that you're going to want to use anyway. Frontal Adept increased critical hit rate of normal frontal attacks by 30% while Valiant Stance is active. Not terrible. I think this is mostly a placeholder right now for fighters until you want a different S4, so not a bad option. Goliath Slayer, loosen, recover 40 PP every 10 seconds when a boss is nearby. Not a bad choice. Again, another good placeholder. Frontal attack. Let's see. Hammer of the Wise. Frontal attack damage increased by 15% when Wise Stance is active. Well, Wise Stance is damage increase from the rear. So this just makes it so if you attack from the front, you don't really have to worry about which side you're attacking from as much. I would probably skip this. If you had to go for one of them, I would probably go for the one that just increases. Oh, this is critical hit rate. Actually, it'd be a toss up. I thought this was just damage. Critical hit rate. Again, these are just placeholder slots. Not really that important. Lifesteal Strike restores HP equal to 1% of damage dealt by, but maxes at 30 HP. Meaning basically, no matter how much damage you deal, the most HP you can recover per hit is going to be 30. So not terrible. What a lot of people tend to use is just for healing in the S4 slot. So pretty much a go-to, pretty common. Lustrous Trap increases PP restore by tactical trap by 20%. Ranger, basically, and then everyone else ignore. If you're going to use it. Medal of the Rested, gain knockback immunity after standing still for 1 second. Again, mostly going to be Ranger, everyone else can ignore. Mighty Chain, gain invincibility for 5 seconds when triggering chain trigger. Mostly going to be an ignore. If you're a gunner, you're probably going to want to have healing on your S4 slot, but again, that's to each their own. It's just one of the slots you have an option for. Mostly going to be a placeholder until something later on down the line. Nuzzle Bestowal, to be honest, I don't really even follow this one because I don't think anyone really uses it. You just gain HP and PP when nearby enemies bosses die. It's just for like, it's for you and the party. I think this is useful like in maybe like Endless, but that's really about it. Photon Adaptation is pretty good. It's essentially it's PP recovery and PP cost consumption down. The way this works out, it shows the formula right there, but essentially the way this works is like, say you have 220 PP. Well, you have 10% of this use. It's kind of crazy to need to get up to 420 pp for its maximum benefit, because it maxes out at 30%. But you're most cases you're going to be looking at maybe an 8 to 10% usage out of this. So just keep that in mind. Precise balance. So this is one of the S4s that actually is pretty well sought after. It reduces your critical hit rate by 50%, but increases your critical hit damage by 6%. So if you can push yourself over 100% crit rate, which is like hero on weak spots, or I think braver, then you can make a lot of use out of this. As long as your crit rate is over 70%, then technically any crit damage bonuses are going to be a damage gain for you. Now, I know I mentioned hero, but hero technically does want a different S4, primarily because if they're not hitting a weak spot specifically, they will lose out on quite a bit of damage. And granted, you always want to be hitting weak spots if you can, but that's not always an option. So keep that in mind when deciding if you want to use precise balance or not. Prolonged Blade reduces the depletion focus gauge of Katana while active. Not a bad choice, but we just talked about precise balance being better, so this is going to be a placeholder if anything. Rainbow Adversity. While Petal Gleam is active, recover 500 HP, you gain 500 more. When you take 500 more damage, this is probably not going to be something you use very often, to be honest. Ooh, a bit of a yawn. Sorry about that, guys. Rainbow Balance. Rainbow Balance is natural PP recovery, I believe, and PP cost consumption. Yes. Natural PP recovery and PP consumption are reduced by 30%. An S4 slot, probably not going to use. Probably going to be a skip, to be honest. Refined Providence increases potency of elemental conversion by 5% for non-matching weapons. Skip. Second Whirlwind increases the duration of Double Saber's Whirlwind by 4 or Flourish by 4 seconds. Not bad. Definitely useful for fighter. Steely Determination survives one fatal hit with 1 HP. Does not work if HP is already at 1. Activates once per quest. This is already potential on Atlas weapons. Also is a 75% activation on Hunter skill tree, so probably going to be a skip in most cases. Amplification support. So the way this works, essentially it increases your maximum duration to 120 seconds. That does not mean that it takes your current cast and make it double of what it is normally. You do have to get the full ticks. If you didn't know how shift or D-band work, they're a field skill where you cast a field, and as long as you're within the field when it ticks, you gain a little bit of that benefit. Shift and D-band work this way, so you do have to tick them up further to get up to 120 seconds. So it increases it by usually being lower, which is nice, but if you already get over this, it really doesn't make any difference. So tossing this on, like, say, a gun slash or, say, jet boots if you're a bouncer can be helpful, but not really going to be super necessary moving forward. A sustained cycle reduces the cooldown of photon flare by 20 seconds. Pretty useful for force, and that's really about it. I mean, that much is obvious. It's photon flare. No one else has access to it. Swift Arrow Strike increases the damage dealt of all increases the damage of all attacks done with the bow by 3% when Rapid Strike is active. Bow Braver. Pretty obvious. Transmutation Circle changes the weapon's element to match the currently equipped elemental defense ring. Has no effect if the elemental ring is not equipped. I hate this S4. This is probably the biggest waste of an S4 I've ever seen. It is great to be able to swap your element on the fly, but to give up your right ring to do it is a pain in the neck, and I don't like it whatsoever. Increases wand normals. S4 wand impact increases wand normal attack speed by 1.1 and negates hit stop. Useful for both Tekker as well as a Twal wand. And now, on the last set, finally, S5s. Amplified Restraint. Deal 3% more damage against enemies inflicted with a status effect. 30 or 40% chance to inflict bind on enemies inflicted with that status effect as well. I don't really think this is used very much other than that like weird hero combination talked about way earlier, but skip over that mostly. A lot of these S5s are bound to specific weapon types because most of them are the effects of old 14-star unique potentials. So they don't work on other weapon types for that reason. So Brilliant Vortex reduces natural PP recovery to 0 while PP is above 50%. Reduces PP consumption by 30% and increases natural PP recovery by 100% while PP is below 50%. So why is this actually good? Well, for those who don't know, fighter or even sub-fighter are at their absolute strongest between 50% and below PP. So if you can maintain that spot more readily, you're going to have damage or more damage overall. Very, very powerful. And this is, of course, Twin Daggers only. And Twin Daggers just got a buff over on Global and on JP. So super, super awesome. Cataclysmic Rhythm increases elemental burst potency by 30%. Automatically activates elemental burst upon using jet boot variant attacks. Basically makes elemental burst not bad. Pretty useful. It's the same effect again as one of the 14 stars, so really nice. Definitely a huge chunk of power for using jet boot, so super useful to grab. Counter Blade. Congratulations, you've absolutely broken Braver. Increases attack power by 2% and increases damage dealt with Braver's counter edge by 15%, as well as Phantom's counter dodge bullet by 10%. It generates Braver gear gauge when you successfully counter an attack. It's actually nutty. Completely nutty for Braver. So if you're a Katana Braver, grab it. And grab it immediately. Elusive Combo. Increases attack by 2% upon successfully executing a double saber when parry. Gear gauge is set to maximum and unleashes a counter attack with Scissor Slash. I don't personally play double saber on on fighter, so I'm not sure how useful this actually is. It sounds useful on paper, but there might be something that I'm missing from this. But this doesn't work for X-Wall, so keep that in mind. Elusive Lucent. Successfully evading through an attack with hero step or stylish roll restores an initial 30 PP and additional 10 PP every 3 seconds afterwards. The effect is lost upon taking damage. So funny enough, this is useful for hero and not as useful for gunner. There's a better S5 for gunner, but for hero, you can basically infinitely counter a brand new star if you're using this S5. Now, this isn't the only choice you have. There's another setup that some heroes want to go for, but this basically makes it so you have dual birds again. You can infinitely counter a brand new star and you don't lose any PP. You actually gain PP back over that time frame, which is kind of crazy. Elusive Smash. Upon successfully evading an attack with Sway, you unleash a counter attack with a large meteor fist. This is just gear experience for Knuckles. Really nice, really strong, super useful. Fatal Round Assault Rifle increases positron blast damage by 150%, reduces its cost to 1 PP, has a 60-second cooldown, and the cooldown resets upon successfully evading an attack with dive roll. Kind of crazy. As long as you dive roll through something, you can positron blast for extra damage and reduce its cost to 1 PP. Kind of crazy. I don't think this is actually used by Assault Rifle, but it's kind of a cool effect overall. And of course, it wouldn't work for Phantom, so because it only affects positron blast. Flash Guard Peerless increases damage by 2%. Very nice. And upon successfully executing a perfect guard, gear is no longer consumed for 15 seconds. That sounds pretty powerful, actually, on paper. I'm not sure how this would work with a very specific... actually, that wouldn't work because it doesn't have an S5 slot. Never mind. But it sounds pretty cool. I don't really play Wired Lance, so I'm not sure how useful that would be overall, but seems all right. So Flash Guard Unleashed. This is kind of weird that this is not on Akatsuki. But it's basically the effect from Akatsuki. Is while you're in sealed form, you recover 10 HP every 10 seconds and get knocked back immunity upon successfully executing a perfect guard. This, they call it SGA, and I had a bit of a yawn there that popped up out of nowhere. But this effect essentially changes into unleashed form and it changes as follows. You get 4% damage increase, 15% PP cost consumption reduction, and a chance to reduce incoming damage to basically 1. Basically what ends up happening, it reduces its damage by 99%. It's kind of weird because you can't see the form change happen. Now keep in mind, this only works with executing a perfect parry. I do not believe a charge parry works. It might. I don't remember if it does or not. But I do know a blaze parry does not work. So can't do it that way. Furious Charge is kind of a meme. Increases power by 2%, inflicts 300% damage. 300% attack power as damage while running, and unleashes a 1000% attack power shockwave when you stop running. It's kind of nutty, kind of dumb, honestly. Maybe there's a use for this in like Endless, but this is kind of silly. Homing Bolt. So all bow PAs except for Banishing Arrow will produce a Chaser Arrow upon hitting an enemy. Successfully evading an attack will boost Chaser Arrow's power by 100% for 15 seconds. It's actually very powerful. Basically, you don't have to build up a ton of Chaser Arrows all the time. All your PAs will produce a Chaser Arrow. So cool. Life Adaptation, kind of a meme. It's essentially if you ever wanted to stack up a ton of HP, now you can do it. It grants bonuses whenever your HP is at 1000, and every 500 afterwards gives you another bonus up to 3000 HP. So you can see all the bonuses here. Damage taken reduction. I believe this is like, I'm told this actually does not work as intended, because there's some weird caps that go along in here. So I'm not sure what that's actually, how this actually works out, but you know, teach you their own, I suppose. But you have damage reduction, HP recovery, increased damage up to 4%, recover HP on attack, and become immune to knockback at 3k. So, if you want to be super tanky, there's your S5. Soaring Blades Lightning Pursuit. Using PEAs will cause blades of lightning equal to 200% attack power to assault the enemy. This has already been tested multiple times. This actually ends up being the strongest S5 available for Soaring Blades for both Bouncer and Etoile. Very, very useful. Basically, it's the potential from Jupiter Tullus. Highly recommend grabbing. Obliterating Blast increases attack power by 2% and creates increases contact blast by 5% and reduces its PP cost to 1, has a 6-second cooldown and resets upon dive rolling through. Not sure how often this is used, but there you go. Rapid support. All support techniques have instant charge time and the power of Zandil is reduced by 34%. Keep in mind this does not work if you switch weapons. If you're using a field ability and you swap weapons, the field goes away. You can't just like super quick charge stuff or insta charge things and then switch off of the weapon itself. Not gonna be very useful. It might be helpful in like cases of, I don't know, if you have access to an S5 and you're buffing, you can use that, but I mean S5s are usually saved for damage, so again, to each is their own. Skillful Adept will. So this is the S5 that most classes are going to use if they can benefit from healing and if they have enough crit. I'm sorry, if they are a class that uses crit, which most of them do. This increases your critical hit rate by 20%, and crit hits will deal an additional 2% damage and recover 1% of the damage dealt as HP. So you're getting damage, you're getting healing, and you're getting crit rate all wrapped into one, which is pretty nutty. Very, very useful. Slight Incantation reduces technique damage by 40%. This basically just makes you into a red mage from Final Fantasy XIV. Basically, if you cast, your next cast is instant. So, kind of cool. They show an example of it. If you want to look over it, you feel free to. Again, link will be in the video description. You can check it out yourself. Steadfast Harpoon increases wand power by 2%, negates hit stop. Every third hit of a normal attack combo will generate a shockwave. This does work with wand Etoile as well as Tekker. Both very useful. And Steadfast Shaft. I don't know who would be using this, but to each is their own. Again, increases the attack speed of rod normal attacks by 1.38%. I was 1.38 times. Negates hit stop and increases the damage of photon bullet by 100%. So, I guess if you want to play force and use photon bullets, there you go. But that'll do it. And that is every single one of the SSAs that we have available to us right now. Keep in mind there are a few more that'll be popping up. I can think of like one I know I'm waiting on, Rising Pursuit, and a couple others other people are waiting on as well. I believe there is one other one that we didn't actually go over because I don't remember going over it. And I know it's an S4 that's very, very powerful for heroes that is currently in the game, which is kind of weird that it's not on this list. Actually, now that I think about it, hang on. Yeah, it's not on this list. I know it's in the game, so I guess they just haven't updated it yet. But essentially what it is it's an S4 that increases your normal attack damage by 13%. Very, very powerful. You absolutely want it because it works with normal attack damage is what you use when you're countering. So it makes things very, very powerful. I don't know if it scales directly with the counter damage itself or if it just scales with the normal attack that you're doing afterwards and then the counter. I'm not sure how the actual scaling itself works out, but it is extremely powerful. It's definitely useful for heroes, specifically on Sword and Talus. So definitely want to get a hold of that S4 if you can. But hopefully this was helpful to you guys. As always, I'm just going to shorten this out. Like, comment, subscribe. Helps out a ton. Completely free. And keeps up with the content as it goes along. Bell icon notifies your videos as they pop up. As well as any community posts that I make. And if you guys want to keep up with those and you don't feel like doing it over here, you're more than welcome to join the Twitter. I'm sorry, to follow me on Twitter or join the Discord. Thanks again for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next video. Take care. Peace out.